Now that we have these awesome new Scout Squad models on the horizon, let's discuss how actually good this unit is for your Space Marine army, and why I believe that any competitive Space Marine list should at least consider bringing a couple of these to the table. Let's first analyze the data sheet. They are a 5-man squad of less experienced Space Marines, which doesn't really translate to their data sheet because they hit on 3s, they still have 2 wounds like a normal Space Marine, and the only considerable difference is the 4+ armor save they have. Let's start the long list of why this unit is good. They have Assault keyword on their Astartes shotguns, so they can actually do actions after advancing, and that's extremely important for the role that this unit is going to fulfill in your Space Marine army. For those of you who are maybe less experienced, by actions I mean when you are drawing a tactical card and it says your unit shouldn't shoot but should be eligible to shoot, cannot charge, and then it does this and that, and you gain some points afterwards. So that's what I mean by action. They are 2 wounds each, T4, 4+ save. So essentially they are your typical Space Marine stat line, with the only difference being the 4+ armor save. In cover it means that it will be the same 3+ save as an intercessor would roll. Attentive viewer would also say, well, but they will not ignore the first point of AP like the intercessors would sort of ignore the first point of AP for having a higher armor save. Yes, you're correct, but I think that if you're being shot with high AP weaponry, if you're very light infantry, very cheap infantry is being shot with high AP guns, you are probably in a good spot already in terms of how your opponent is using their efficiency, that being efficiency of their damage output. So a 4+ save is far from being a deal breaker for these guys, especially for the price, because they are 55 points per squad of 5 in the new Minotaur Field Manual version 1.4. which is extremely cheap. Significantly cheaper than the 85 points that the regular intercessors cost, and even the 80 points for a squad of the assault intercessors. They can have 1 heavy bolt or 1 missile launcher per 5 guys in the squad, and you would almost never run anything but MSU. But still, that's quite good, because that 1 shot of D6 damage, strength 9, AP 2 of the missile, or if you're running the heavy bolter, the heavy bolter profile, can be quite beneficial again from that extremely cheap squad. But damage is not why we want to take them, obviously. The main thing they bring to the table is the mobility. They have Scout 6 and Infiltrators, so you can deploy them anywhere on the board 9 inches away from your opponent's deployment zone, and they can also, at the start of the first battle round, move up to 6 inches, and as far as I know, nothing prevents you from using both abilities. So setting them up 9 inches away from your opponent, and depending on who goes first, either, for example, moving them forward to maybe move block or charge something and tie something up for your opponent, or moving backwards and protecting them from shooting and charges, obviously. These are 2 extremely powerful abilities, and they ensure that you will get these guys to where they need to go for your scoring purposes, and again, blocking, movement, screening, etc. That's not it. They also get Guerrilla Tactics ability, which allows them to go to reserves, strategic reserves, but still at the end of your movement phase, and when they are out of 6 inches from any enemy units, which is almost always. Don't need to be 6 inches away from the battlefield edge or anything like that. They just disappear and then reappear at the edge of the board. And now that the strategic reserves are much simpler and better, arguably, than they were in 9th edition, with less restrictions on where you can put your models. Essentially, turn 2, you cannot put them into the deployment zone of your opponent, and otherwise anywhere within 6 of the edge of the board. And turn 3, you can put them just anywhere within 6 of the edge of the board. And that's quite a lot of freedom for a 55 points squad. And just a little caveat, just from me. I hated the look of scouts. Ever since I was playing in 8th edition in tournaments against guys who brought in 8th edition, they were extremely popular because they were troops, so you could bring just a bunch of cheap guys like that. And they were all of those ugly, weird-looking models with strange faces, and I just hated that. And now, look at that model. It looks wonderful. It looks like a proper Space Marine should, and I would love to have them in my collection, as I'm sure you would as well. Next, let's discuss the tactics. So, as a Space Marine player, you need small, cheap units to be mobile for scoring. You are not playing Drukhari, so your stuff is universally more expensive and beefier than some other factions. Most of your tough damage dealing units aren't fast. They are dreadnoughts who move 8 at best, some move 6, tanks and terminators who are 5-inch move. Plus, with them, you need to be much more careful with the angles when you are moving them, because you don't want to lose them. They are your main workhorses, they are your main damage dealers, so you really need to be very careful with how you're positioning them. And it's nice to sometimes be able to be a bit more frivolous with how you're positioning your units. Sometimes, again, you also want to throw a spanner into the works of your opponent's movement phase and just block their slow, heavy Terminator brick that will have to go through these 5 scouts before moving on to something in your army that you don't want them to charge. And with 5 32mm bases, you can take up quite a lot of room on the board. Obviously, beware of the flamers, because that's where the 4+ save can really get you. And these guys are just purely better than the Inquisitorial Henchmen, in my opinion. First of all, I don't like mixing units in Space Marine lists. That's just something that I don't like. You may be different, but in any case, I think that one more guy, yes, they cost 15 points more, but you get one more guy, you get 4+ save instead of 5+, you get T4 instead of T3, you get 6+ leadership instead of 7, you get redeploy, and also you get the assault keyword on your guns, so you can do the actions after advancing. That is, in my opinion, enough to justify paying extra 15 points. I'd still have Calidus Assassin for the CP tricks and a bit freer redeploy, because you can redeploy her and set her up using Deep Strike instead of using strategic reserves, but still I think the scouts would be a very good addition to her, and having 1 or 2 of them in your army is almost a must-have at this point. I would personally start all competitive Space Marine lists with Calidus, 2 scout squads and 1 unit of infiltrators, just to protect you from almost any problem in terms of scoring and being mobile, and also protecting you from Deep Strike using the infiltrators ability. Lastly, let's talk about the synergy a little bit. I really like them for almost all the Space Marine detachments, because the Space Marine archetype needs the scouts, not a particular detachment. But in any case, they're good with Gladius, because you can get them to advance and charge something that your opponent really doesn't want to charge with the assault doctrine. They can also fall back sometimes and charge something with the tactical doctrine. If your opponent's unit cannot fall back, should charge, it may cause some serious problems with them. Even if they can, that may need them to fall back, and then they cannot advance, for example. So another issue there. Very good. And the same goes for the Stormlads detachment, where you can also pay a CP to make the scouts advance 6 automatically. Very situational, obviously, because you will probably have some other units to use that stratagem on, like if you're playing the infamous White Wolves that you can actually use with this detachment very well. You will probably spend that command point, that stratagem, on them instead of the scouts, but I just wanted to give you that option as well. Vanguard Spearhead will love them because, first of all, extra durability. Yes, they have smoke keywords, so you can always protect them like that. By the way, they also have the grenades keyword, so if you are close by to something that your opponent doesn't really want you to put 4 mortar wounds on, you can do it if you're within 8 inches and have a command point on standby. In any case, the Vanguard Spearhead really loves infantry because of all the tricks you can do with stratagems. For example, the 1 CP calculated feint, where you can move away from your opponent's charge, potentially preventing a bigger and more important charge of an important unit of yours, because your opponent maybe has to declare both of the units, and then one unit is out of reach or much further, and they need a much higher charge to actually reach both in engagement, and that's how you can screw up all your opponent's plans. It's very, very strong. And probably the most promising detachment now is the Iron Storm Spearhead, where you're gonna use all the heavy bulky vehicles, and obviously that's where you really want to have some fast, cheap units to throw around, do actions, perform your tactical cards, be mobile. And yes, you have Calidus, but Calidus cannot be in 2 places at the same time. And the second best unit to do all these things are scouts, as the infiltrators, for example, are a bit too expensive to do that. They cost 100 points, which is almost twice of the price of the scouts. And arguably, you can do the same things things with these guys as you can do with the infiltrators. So let me know what you think about these guys now. I think they look awesome as models. They are very good in terms of what they can give your army, and I just don't see a reason why you wouldn't use them at their current price point, which is wonderful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.